Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago. So, you can call that free speech or not. He was fired for lack of talent.
Some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it. Friday, the White House flew the flags at half-staff, which got some criticism. But on a human level, you can see how hard the president is taking this.
My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. May I ask, sir, personally, how are you holding up over the last day and a half, sir?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks? They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty.
Yes. He's at the fourth stage of grief, construction.
Free speech and cancellation, Jimmy Kimmel, the late night show comedian in the US, he's had a show for decades now, I think. He's been cancelled, apparently. At least his show has been paused indefinitely, and that's because of a monologue that he gave in which he tried to suggest that the shooter in the Charlie Kirk political assassination is part of the MAGA movement, and then he went on to mock Trump. Let's take a look at part of his monologue now.
We had some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Now, after delivering that monologue, he was then cancelled by the ABC, the American network ABC, and this was praised by Trump as well, who posted to his Truth social page, congratulations for finally doing it. Now, Jimmy Kimmel has had poor ratings for years. I found that part of his monologue particularly odious because it was so disingenuous that there has been so much evidence that the suspect, we should say suspect, he has been charged at this stage, obviously, that he was motivated by far left ideology, from what was engraved on the bullet casings to now what we know about his text messages with his transgender lover, and his own family, who were Trump supporters and conservative, actually turned him in to try and smear the MAGA movement as somehow being responsible for this. I think is just the lowest of the low.
Well, it's blatantly false. So this monologue went up on Monday. The assassination happened on Thursday. By that point, there was already enough evidence to say this was motivated by someone with far left ideology. Jimmy Kimmel, I think this was the nail in the coffin. He went to air again on the Tuesday. He had time to walk it back. He had time to correct the record and say, you know, I know last night I said they were a MAGA person. It's actually not true. They're from the left, but he didn't. he just glossed over it. And I think that is the problem. You have people who feel like just because they have a TV show or a platform, they can say whatever they want and do whatever they want. This is not cancel culture. This is consequence culture. If you want to get up on national TV and spread blatant lies that confuse people and that are just false and deeply offensive, well, you will face consequences, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think the other thing worth noting is everyone talks about free speech and how we should have free speech, but the reality is this is a very well-paid big star with a national platform, albeit his ratings have declined in recent years. He is bound by a contract, which means his big bosses who have their own pressures, their own network agreements, their own broadcast standards and everything else, if they're copping pressure, they reserve the right to do something about that. And in this case, I've got the view that when you talk about the next day, he may have been given the opportunity to go on air and say, look, I just want to clarify something from last night. I didn't get this quite right. Instead, only a few days after a tragedy that has been felt all around the world, he's making jokes about that in any sense. And so there was an opportunity here to apologise, but instead, I'm sorry, but you're bound by a contract. If your bosses decide you're being stood down until you go through some training or something like that, then so be it.
Having said all of that, I do think there's a difference between someone like Jimmy Kimmel, who is a comedian at the end of the day and is not a journalist. It's one thing for a CNN host or an MSNBC host to stand up and report lies, and there have been plenty of occasions or misleading comments, but he is a comedian, and I do think this also does set a dangerous precedent. Again, I fear that this makes him a free speech martyr, and I'll note that it's only recently, when their side seems to be losing in the polls, like with Trump, that it's kind of cute that the left now cares about free speech. I mean, they've been cancelling people on the right for decades, and now they care when there are consequences to their own people.
Joining us now is CJ Pearson, RNC Youth Advisory Council co-chair. CJ, great to see you again. So many lies from the media. I mean, it's absolutely effed up. Can I get your reaction to the decision to pull Jimmy Kimmel Show?
I'm disgusted, to be quite frank, about the rhetoric that we just heard in those clips. So to be quite frank, I thought that you had to be funny to host a late night show. And so I think this decision by ABC is long overdue to pull Jimmy Kimmel Show. At the end of the day, if this was something that happened to those on the left, we would be condemning it. We would say that it was wrong. Why can't those on the left do it? Well, it says a lot about them and a lot less than it does about us.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jimmy Kimmel could actually be probed by federal investigators after telling his audience that Charlie Kirk, suspected killer, was a MAGA supporter. Federal Communications Commission boss Brendan Carr told podcaster Benny Johnson that he's considering an investigation into Kimmel and his network. And you know what? I support an investigation because there has been so many lies. I'm so sick of hearing from so many different outlets that, this suspected murderer could have actually been a Trump supporter or his parents were conservative. I mean, the evidence is out there. Authorities have made it clear that this person was increasingly political and more left-leaning, had a trans boyfriend. I'm so sick of mainstream media outlets just ignoring some of the facts.
I'm sick of it too. And as you said, there has been every single strand of evidence that has, arisen throughout this entire ordeal has proven that this was a far left-wing radical influenced by the transgender agenda to commit harm and commit violence. Anything else is a departure from reality and a departure from truth. And so, we also saw it from here, at the University of Alabama, where I'm currently at, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where we hosted a memorial event for Charlie Kirk. We had a professor. Right-on-right violence was out of control. Right-on-right violence, this was someone who put on a bullet, catch this fascist. I'm sorry, Gabriella, you know this too. Conservatives don't speak like this. Supporters of President Trump don't speak like this. This was someone who was mentally ill, but also too corrupted by the woke mind virus and used that to commit harm in a way that was absolutely irreparable and absolutely just unforgivable.